Yeah.
Number one is the electronic waste not being dealt very much by many people. So have you also started doing something? Number two is the work done in the rural areas. You have taken the cities, municipalities, because a lot of it is required in the rural area, which is much larger and spread out. So different types of material for use and other things are required. So could you throw some light on that?
Actually, in Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs deal with the urban areas only, the cleanliness. And moreover, electronic waste is not in our domain. Ministry of Environment and Forest is looking after that electronic waste. But drinking water and sanitation is doing a lot in rural areas as far as Swachh Bharat mission is concerned. And they've taken a number of steps to, because they are the main component is the ODF. So they are doing a lot of work there in ODF.
That is true, but the question is, you have tried to get all the people together. That's a very good sign because each one has specialized in something or the other. Similarly, if you could get the rural people also together instead of just one ministry looking after it, it will do a lot of good.
So what we'll take, normally after these discussions, we have quite after these presentations, we have quite a lot of discussion. But because it would be good to take a few questions and then we can, because we have three speakers, so it would be good to have to take a few questions and then come back to the speakers, so I can structure it that way a little better.
Okay.
So if there are any more questions.
Could you please speak in the mic?
Yes. So we'll take a round of questions now. So we'll take 3 or 4 questions. Then we'll come back to the speakers for a response, and we can have several rounds because we have, an adequate amount of time. So everybody's discussions can be kind of included in this. And we've had, 3 presentations now, looking at the same problem from different methodologies and different perspectives. So, it would be good to in response to the questions also to go through the 3 speakers and get their comments in on this. So, sir, after yours, if yes.
Well, this is not question exactly, but a couple of comments for all the presenters. Okay. Well.
Yes, it would be great also if you tell us your name and your institution affiliation.
My
is
name
not
is
compulsory, but just because it helps the speakers understand where
okay.
your question is.
So my name is Majumdar. I've been with waste management for about 4 decades. So this is kind of my bread and butter and passion, everything. Anyway, so my comments are in general about the previous 3 presentations. You see, basically, I'm a waste practitioner also. So basically what I tell people when they come to me for a solution, 3 things: show me the waste, show me the site, that is the area, and show me the money. You see, it's something which has to be designed. I mean, it's not whether it should be centralized or decentralized. So it has to be designed as per the situation. So therefore, planning, planning, planning. Planning is the most important thing. Comprehensive planning, which should have everything. Technical, financial, social, everything should be included in the planning. And I think one should plan for 1 year, and then maybe one would be able to execute in 6 months. Otherwise, plan in 2 months and execute for the rest of your life, nothing happens. So therefore, planning is very, very important. Proper planning, proper detailed planning. Now, a lot of discussions were there about the informal recycling. Well, there are 2 issues which comes to my mind. One is, and which I have been trying to emphasize in the government sectors also, because I have been into different committees of the ministries for forming rules and other things, that the recycling should always be environmentally and health-wise compatible. That should be the primary condition. Just removing something doesn't mean it is being recycled. So recycling has to be properly done. Okay. Then the planning should come out with whether and how much of decentralized and centralized option should be there. And again, here, land is the most important determinant. If there is no land, I was very pleasantly surprised to hear from Swati that they have 440 compost pits as such and 7 decentralized facilities. Well, that way I would say Muzaffarpur is lucky, or they have been very plucky to do that. But normally what we find is getting land is the biggest issue. And we have really missed the bus in terms of land use planning. Today, if I look around, how many cities do we have where the land use planning mentions that, well, this plot or these plots are meant for waste management, whether for solid waste or for wastewater or whatever, in decentralized or centralized forms. Most of them do not have this thing. So that is, even now it is very important, and I would request Director SBM to look into this, that for any future developments, this should be included, this should be the most important component of the land use planning. Then, yeah, okay. Panaji, of course, is a very, again, a very pleasant surprise, and I would say Sanjit Rodrigues has been very proactive into this. I think they had even 8 bins at one point of time, and in the manual that we had made from the ministry, we had about 3 pages of coverage of Panaji. Now, for segregation, I would like to mention very emphatically that the ULB has to come out with a foolproof solution. It's not that I segregate or we segregate. When it comes out of our premises, it again gets, completely mixed up. So the ULB has to have a complete plan. And one thing, you see, there was in one presentation, I think Remy's or Ains, I think it was mentioned that in India it is less than 1%. Actually, our property tax, Remy, this is for you and also for Ain. You see, you had mentioned in your presentation that in India it is less than 1%. Actually, in our property tax, this is included. Of course, if you want to dissect the property tax, it is difficult in practice. But it is presumed that the property tax includes this also. Therefore, the question of having separate collection or transportation charges, that is something which has to be done separately. So these are issues which we need to resolve. Then only we can have a sustainable waste management, whether it is solid or wastewater. Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions for this round? Or shall I hand this over to you? Huh? You have a question? Yes, go ahead.
So this is for Mr. Agarwal. Yes.
Yeah.
You were mentioning at some point that you're going to change the tariff for acquiring electricity from waste to energy plants, but you didn't. I didn't see numbers of the new tariff. Can you tell us? Okay, you said that 7 rupees. Anyway, can you give us more details about the tariffs of buying electricity from waste to energy plants? Thank you.
And we had one more question to the gentleman here. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So let him. He'll come first, and then you.
Ma'am,
Introduce
I'm
yourself.
Colonel Bansal.
Huh.
For better awareness, the Swachh Bharat instructions should form a part of the education of schools and colleges.
Ma'am? Swati, if you could switch on the mic.
Actually, I think I'm loud enough. And it's a small question. It's about volunteers. You talked about, as you said, social engineering is a clear issue. And it seemed to me from your presentation in Muzaffarpur that volunteers had a big role. Who are they? How are they recruited? Who pays?
So you have to wait.
I'm sorry. So you have to answer.
Yeah. Okay, great. So now we will ask since a number of questions relating to Swachh Bharat, so we'll ask you to respond first, and then we'll go to the other 4 panelists actually.
Yeah.
You can respond in any way. You don't have to.
Regarding this school education, I have a meeting with in the Ministry of HRD, and actually their point of view is that we are unnecessarily loading too much on children. because everything we expect from children that it should be included in their curriculum. This is one of their point of view. And second thing is that as far as cleanliness is concerned, they have some books, some 2 or 3 chapters already in primary school, and they are in the process of creating more chapters for middle and secondary education also. They are doing it, but their point of view is also valid that we expect too much from children. As far as curriculum is concerned, we can have an exercise in schools, and we can have this hands-on type of thing in schools. But to add curriculum and because every ministry is now approaching them to include their things in their school.
Just awareness.
Yeah.
Just to make them aware, that's all.
And second thing is that waste to energy. And second thing is waste to energy. Waste to energy, the rate has been fixed by government, and it is rupees, in terms of rupees, it is 7 rupees 4 paisa. If you are generating electricity from waste, and if you are generating from RDF, it is 7 rupees 90 paisa. RDF, refuse that. I think it is 2016. No, it is not in that. It is passed by department by.
Department of Power, the power tariff would be set. Their ministry will make a recommendation, but the power tariff will be set by the Ministry of Power.
You got the answer?
There is a Central Electricity Regulatory
CEC.
and then every state has their own state commissions who actually regulate this.
So now we'll come to you guys. Remy, you can respond to any of the questions that have come so far, the questions and comments, and then we'll swap it.
About informal recycling, as Mr. Masundar mentioned clearly, the recycling should be compatible and properly done. And of course, and there is a lot of work to achieve in that sense, because most of the recycling industries that I've been following these last few years are not really properly regulated, and because it's not properly recognized, and so you have a lot of abuses, not only environmental. It's not environmental friendly, of course, when people are not respecting any norms because there is no norms because they are not supposed to exist, but also regarding child labor and exploitation of the workers. So of course it needs to be properly done and properly regulated, but for this it should be properly recognized, which is not yet the case, I think. But after, to come back to the plastic story, I've noticed also, and I've seen that also in Vietnam, that when you begin to recycle plastic, even this solution is not a panacea, in the sense that you cannot do it all the time. And slowly you need to add more and more carbons to make the plastic more solid, which means that at one point of time, and you cannot recycle it. So the solution about recycling is to produce less, to generate less waste as possible. Then you will have less problem regarding recycling. And the property tax, for the property tax, of course, we have not contabilized it in our survey, but of course, because the waste municipal expenses are done by the municipality, and property tax is one of the major components of the municipal revenue. So of course, waste management is funded by the property tax. But I think, and I'm not I'm not a proper financial analysis, but I think that it makes sense to create revenue and expense dedicated for waste management service only. I think it can simplify the financial accounting of the waste management service. And I'm telling that because I've been spending some time with the South Delhi municipality trying to get this financial data. I got it, and it's a little bit difficult to analyze, not because it is the waste management service, not because it is Delhi, but all the financial analyses that I've done in India are very, very difficult actually, because it's very fuzzy and very mixed. So that might be also something to work on. A proper financial accounting system. I know it is supposed to be in place in 2005, but still.
Yes, the MCDs are a little worse than the normal. The norm as far as municipalities are concerned in their accounting systems, the MCDs are a little worse than that. So I think a lot of other ULBs it may be a little more streamlined. But anyway, we come to its. I'll use my moderator's privilege and get Swati now to come in and respond because some of the specific questions were directed. Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
But I will mention you actually. Now about because Mr. Mazumdar, you said that we missed the bus in terms of land use planning, and you are advising to do more planning. I think there are also two ways to take the issue into consideration because, of course, I mean we know, and it's now internationally speaking, not only about India. We know that the cities are going to grow very fast. So maybe you can advocate for long-term planning and to plan according to demographic projection and to preserve some land for landfill or sanitary landfill or incineration or whatever. But what was very interesting in Swati's presentation is that if you promote rather the decentralized systems, then you don't need to have long-term planning. And what we know as planners is that in this space of urbanization, especially in developing countries, it's impossible to do long-term planning that is going to be implemented per se. Meaning that even in developing countries with low demographic growth like France, we don't manage to have the implementation of our plans. So imagine in very fast-growing cities, then maybe it's better to have decentralized system because you won't have this problem of finding new lands and so on. This was one remark. And about the financial system, in different countries there are several ways of collecting taxes or fees for waste management. Just for you to know that in France, almost half of the financing is done not by the households, not by the user, let's say, but by the producer, and industries, in fact, that are producing material goods. And we know that at the end of the day that they will produce some waste. So they are taxed quite heavily by the state, and then this is used for waste management. So it's also an option, I mean.
Turn to Swati. So we'll have we'll have another round of discussion after this perhaps, but Swati and
So you asked me where do these 70 volunteers come from. Actually, it's a very unique partnership that we have in Muzaffarpur. We are working with the corporation. So in Muzaffarpur, we are working under a tripartite partnership, and this is not a contract. Just to clarify, between the corporation, the municipal corporation, a think tank, which is Center for Science and Environment, and industry, which is ITC. So under their CSR funds, they have this well-being out of waste initiative, wherein they are working in the city. So they are bearing the propagation cost under this project, which means these 70 volunteers which were hired from the city, most of them are graduates, some of them are homemakers who wanted to do something for the city. They get paid about 7,000 rupees for a month, for their contribution to support propagation and spread the message of segregation across the different wards of the city. So it's a private company that is paying them under the CSR fund. So that makes this entire model very unique. It's like a multiple stakeholder engagement.
So if I can, come in with a comment or a question of my own, across the three presentations, I think one of the interesting things, and I think this is the challenge of the solid waste management sector, the fact that so much of the current system is informal, and the nature of formalizing or the nature of bringing infrastructure and planning for infrastructure is, the nature of it is that you need all of this to be, in an ideal world, infrastructure planners would be able to see it in formal terms so that they could account for it and plan for it properly. We've had, in fact, now a generation or two of solid waste privatizations, PPP projects, contracts, which, you know, it's like a zameen asman ka difference between what the contract says and what the real practice behind which the contractor is only implementing is. And so now we are, you know, perhaps in the second or third generation of the modernization of solid waste in India. In that time, I mean, what is heartening, and I think this is, I mean, it's a really interesting thing, is that there has been a lot of work. There's been a lot of research, a lot of activism, NGOs, you know, the policy community, they have engaged with each other quite a lot in the solid waste sector. I mean, you know, I personally, you know, I'm currently working in the liquid waste sector, and, you know, there's a huge difference in how much in the solid waste sector people are aware of each other's issues and how much they're able to plan for each other's issues. In fact, even the government, the successive kind of guidelines, programs, interventions that come, they also seem to be informed by the perspectives of, you know, non-government partners who have been working in this space. You know, this generation of guidelines, it's difficult to integrate informal waste pickers, but, you know, there is recognition of their role in the informal waste, you know, of the informal sector in the processing of waste. You know, Swati, your comments, and sir, your comments on this and yours. I mean, you know, I think it would be nice to have your different perspectives on this conundrum between the informal and formal, and, you know, all the challenges of getting environmental standards, safety standards, workers' safety, all of that stuff into this formal, informal. But, you know, if there are any more, you know, should we go directly to them, or do we have more questions, comments that we can take along with this round? Is there anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm JP Gupta, and from corporate sector. I have got one query with the CSC speaker. You said in LAP, this hard waste is collected after a few days by the corporation, and wet waste is left to the individual.
Yes.
I really don't know how they dispose of. There must be some system. I don't expect every household to go and dispose of the waste of their own. The second thing about general question is about the segregation of the waste. You know, I personally feel that environment, for that matter, even the developed countries, expecting a segregation of the waste at every household level, I don't think it happens in any country. Even in Singapore, which is supposed to be the cleanest city, I doubt if every household is, you know, putting their waste in the different bins. It's all dumped into the chute, and from there it is collected, and then probably a centralized system, they do the segregation if at all is being done. I really don't know the answer, but comments from the experts.
So we go to the experts now. Swati, do you want to come into this first?
Yeah. Considering the, you know, big debacle between informal and formal, one issue with informal sector is also, for instance, in Muzaffarpur, we started giving identity cards because we wanted the informal sector to operate our processing centers for composting. And we couldn't do this, I mean, the corporation couldn't do this because most of them didn't have proper details or proper information. Most of them even didn't have a valid voter ID or an identification card. So, you know, probably sitting in this elite circle, it becomes very easy to say, let's formalize the informal sector. But when you work on the ground, there are a lot of issues. One challenge is also of identity, like who should you take in, who should you get associated with, or who should you not, because most of them are migrants. So probably if Muzaffarpur had around 350 to 400 informal workers who were working in the waste sector, we could only take 100 of them. We couldn't absorb all 450. So, of course, there are a lot of challenges. One of the major ones is that they don't have valid identity proofs or details, so that formalize them. But of course, it's very important to weave them, you know, into this entire system because they do have a lot of knowledge and they do come with a lot of background that could be used when you're...
The only challenge though, or is it also the economics of the model that becomes difficult?
Of course, I mean, there is infrastructure, there is resources, there is extra cost and funds that may be required for hiring it. For instance, we are setting up informal sector into a cooperative model in the city, wherein when the compost is sold, probably the informal sector would also get some share of it. So probably making it into a cooperative would work better than them getting money from the corporations. That on the ground not really works out, because corporations don't have that amount of funding that they can take 100 to 200 informal workers. You need to create a system for them so that income is generated and they get some share out of it. That sort of funding mechanism needs to be created. Coming on Alapura, most of the houses are segregating, treating wet waste. But what the corporation has also done is that Alapura has 23 urban wards. So these 23 urban wards also have 23 community composting centers, where people who don't have the advantage of space, or they can't compost, or they don't have that much space to compost at source or to have a biomethanization plant, they have timings there to go to the center between 7 to 9 in the morning. They can go there and give their segregated wet and dry waste. So in these, yes, every day you also have the advantage, if you're not treating your wet waste at source, you can go to the nearest community composting center and give your segregated wet and dry waste. So they've already created that mechanism. So I would say metros, I would say metropolitans would need hybrid solutions. I won't say a Delhi can replicate Alapura, but a Delhi could have a hybrid solution, you know, a part of Alapura or a part of what DEFCOL is doing. So it would also need a waste to energy plant ideally, we can't say, but it cannot be 80% dependent on a waste to energy plant. So that's the scenario.
Composting your household waste nowadays is not that hard.
It's not.
We are doing it now. A lot of people now are doing it, and it's really a bin in your kitchen.
Like Delhi, where the space is becoming a big issue.
Yeah, but it's
If you look at the household, which is so compact, there's hardly a kitchen where a person, 1 or 2% can stand. To expect them to have, this type of and have 5
No,
different
your
bins.
point is taken.
These are asking far too much.
So I'll come for one, you guys want to come in first and then you come in.
No, I just want you to know that Paris is a very dense city also, and we don't have room in the kitchen, but we segregate. And the thing is that we do a lot of compost now, even in Paris, but the thing is that then we don't know how to use it because we don't have agriculture nearby, but anyway, we can use it for public open spaces and so on. The rate of, I think, I should check, but I think the rate of segregation in France is about 40% of the waste, which is not that good, to be honest. I think some northern European countries probably do better. But what is interesting also is that in the rural area, people segregate more because traditionally they do compost and these kind of things, you know. So sometimes it's contrary to what we think in cities, it's more difficult. So as you said, we have to find hybrid, you said, hybrid solution, yes.
So maybe just also about the compost. And we need to find a solution how to make it like sustainable, because what do you do with compost when you are in the middle of the city? Of course, I mean, like in Paris, but that was also one of the results of the survey of the ILFS composting plant in Auckland. There was a problem about, reselling it, where to put it. And so yes, but I think there are a lot of solutions possible if you subsidize it. I mean, if there is an inclusion in a larger governmental scheme to ensure that this compost which is produced is actually used at an affordable prices by different users, I don't know, there might be something to think about on that point.
These are actually very long-term discussions. Anyway, otherwise,
Actually, as far as segregation is concerned, there is no other solution but to segregate. Because the thing is that wet and dry waste generate separately. If they generate separately, then by mixing it's our habit actually. Tell me one instance where dry waste and wet waste generate simultaneously. Actually, in Indian culture, 70-80% is wet waste. If I take my example of my house, if I generate 1 kg or 1.2 kg in a day, almost 800 to 1 kg is wet waste. And if, as Majumdar sir said, that if they the ULBs have not that much of supporting infrastructure, so that wet waste and dry waste can be carried away separately, then we have already tell to ULBs also that you can lift 5 days wet waste and 2 days dry waste in a same vehicle. But to avoid segregation is not a solution. I think without segregation, thing will become not. It's like complicating a simple equation.
Thanks so much for that, and I think we'll wind up this, the formal level of the discussions now. There is a cocktail reception at AFT, which is exactly across this narrow road, the road outside that you come through Dharma Marg. It's exactly just on the other side of Dharma Marg. So we hope you'll join us at this thing, and we can continue. हाँ ठीक है हाँ.
I would say in smart cities that we are coming to talk about. What is it that we are going to have in terms of waste disposal?
It's a smart way of
स्मार्ट सिटी हर सिटी ने अपना प्रपोजल दिया है कि वो अपना सिटी स्मार्ट कैसे बनाना चाहते हैं. एवरी सिटी हैज गॉट इट्स ओन प्रायोरिटी in smart city.
Most of which is not really applicable.
Not everything.
You need smart people for smart cities. Nothing more.
Not smart, but behavior change is more mindset and behavior change is more important.
And your this Swachhta app issue will look into.
Swachhta app is very good. Because I can tell which city will be number 1 ranking, number 2, number 3.